Hey guys, it's Django here. Today I would like to show you my live rig that I've been working on for the past 3 months or so. Okay, so what I have here is my laptop being controlled by a Novation Launchkey 25 Mark I and Ableton Push 1. And then I've got a cheap Behringer sound card. I have an audience sound card which is in for repairs, and then I've got bongos. So let me just run you through what's going on. I've got Ableton running and I have a few tracks, so we can see them on here. I've got some loops. They're in a drum rack, but what I've done is I've put the loops track as a MIDI track. It's being sent from this track into that track. The reason I did that was so that I could use the melodic step sequencer. I can put multiple loops on at the start of the bar in melodic step sequencer mode instead of having to have a whole lot of different tracks. And then I can even stay in notes mode. So I can go between the sort of live drums on my drum track and the various loops that are triggered. I made them all 2-bar loops and dragged them into drum rack once they were warped. Drum rack actually usually warped things without any issues, so I didn't actually have to warp them. It sort of seems to know when it's a drum loop rather than a single hit. I guess it's a longer file. So then I've got various drum sounds. My kick drum is muted, so I have that on every track. If we go to session, you'll see I've got the only tracks that are populated are the loops track and the drums track. And on the loops track, I've also got a sidechain source sound. So it's like an operator just playing a little blip at every beat. And then it's muted on that track so you don't hear it, or rather on the track that it's that this MIDI track is sending to. It's muted there, but on my compressors you can still receive from that track. So it's a ghost sort of sidechain source. So even if my kick's muted, certain things might still pulse. So it has its uses. It's also nice if you have a longer kick, you might want a shorter sidechain still. So I like to just send a very short little blip from operator. So that's on this track. And then I can trigger my loops within those clips. These are all 2-bar long, as are my loops. So when I trigger a loop, it loops for 2 bars until I turn it off. And then on the drums track, I'll often use the step sequencer and just program in what I need, or play it in, record it and play it in. Then I've got a bass track. Let's go out of melodic steps. I keep it in chromatic because I jam with others sometimes and the key might change quite often, and I might DJ with it, and then whatever the track's key is what I'll jam in. So yeah, I've got a couple of bass sounds there. And then the same goes for other tracks. I'll have, like, I've got a harmony track, and then right now it's a string, but there are other sounds on this track. So I can just choose a sound, record in a sequence. Here's a piano. Same goes for all of my tracks, basically. I try to limit it to about 5 different sounds. So yeah, this is my push setup, and then I've also got, if I go to session, I can bank across. I've got a mic track. So over here are my bongos. And then if I turn the track on over here, I've got 1 track for monitoring and 1 track for recording. The reason for this is if you turn monitoring on the track that you're recording, live doesn't compensate for latency. So if I'm playing, the bongos are quite loud. So if there's a delay between when I hit the sound and when it comes out the speakers, I'm not going to notice necessarily. So I prefer live to compensate for that latency. So what you do is on your recording track, you have monitoring set to off. and then live compensates for the latency. So that's a little trick that I learned. So if I want to record, I record onto that track. And if I want to just play, it's on this track, which is always monitoring. So I just mute it there when I save my session. So when I open it up again, I don't get any surprises. So if I play the bongos now, my latency is a bit high, so I can record the screen for you. But you can maybe hear the double coming out of the speaker. What I've also got is this MIDI foot pedal. This is an FBV Express. I found out about it sort of by accident. Someone was advertising one secondhand. I couldn't get hold of him. He mentioned that it had MIDI, and when I phoned various music shops, they didn't know it had MIDI either. And it's sort of because it's also got a port for a proprietary Line 6 sort of port to control their amps, but it also has MIDI. And I saw some videos about it and saw that it worked with Reason, so I was like, hey, this could be fantastic. 4 buttons, you can change how they react. For example, I think I've set this one to be a toggle, so the light goes on, light goes off. The others are all momentary. And so I've got this one here is for recording. Recording my bongos, theoretically, because that's the track that's selected. It's actually mapped to the overdub button in live, which is, you see that guy? Yeah, that little button there is the overdub, session overdub button. And if there's nothing in the audio cell, then it just starts recording a new thing in that cell. If it's MIDI, it starts to overdub. So if you have fixed length clips, that's what I used to do. I used to overdub into fixed length clips. And that also works quite well. The reason I did that was I had Groove pre-applied to the clips, and then I wanted to just record into them. So yeah, that's my recording button, and then the expression pedal is mapped to delay. So no delay, and then I get a nice echo. So it's nice for rolls. For like drum rolls and stuff during breakdowns, is quite cool. So yeah, whatever scene is selected and whichever track is selected, when you hit overdub, it records into that cell. To sort of sum it up, this is my keyboard, the Novation Launchkey 25. And then this is my sort of clip launching, as well as drum step sequencing. If I go in here, I can sort of step sequence drums. My kick is muted, so I will hold mute and then press the kick and mute. Need 2 hands. So yeah, that is how I step sequence things. You can also record stuff in, of course. Like by default, I start out with the kick muted because I'll be DJing. And then there's usually a kick in the song, so I don't want to accidentally hit the kick while I'm playing other drums. And then if I do want the kick, then I can unmute it, and there's already a 4 on the floor there, but I can also change it before I unmute it. So yeah, that's already in the track. And then the crash, although it repeats every 2 bars, I've actually automated the volume so it only plays every 16 bars. And the kick sort of mutes itself every 16 bars as well. So it's just sort of I can play a fill there, or I can leave it empty. I could theoretically build a full track in this view with my various tracks, with a melody and harmony and some pads and bass. But what I tend to do is my sort of produced music tends to have a bit more polish. So here in the background, I also have Traktor running. And what I'll usually do is I'll either be DJing or I'll play stripped out versions of my tracks, and then I will sync Ableton to Traktor. So initially I tried Ableton Link. You see Link there, you switch it on there, and you switch it on there in Ableton, and then you have them on the same clock effectively. The issue I had with that was in Traktor, every bar I would hear a little artifact, and it wasn't hugely noticeable, but when I did notice it, it started to irritate me. And I might try Mix Vibes Cross, which is another DJ program, but I was also considering using stems, so I'd prefer not to have to switch because Traktor supports four stem files in a M4A file, so you can actually mix the individual stems inside Traktor. The reason I'm using Traktor to play tracks instead of Ableton is I can go into user mode on push. There are two MIDI channels for push. There's MIDI in 1 and MIDI in 2. MIDI in 1 is the normal push control, and MIDI in 2 is the user mode. But unfortunately, now the first issue is you can only get to user mode once you've opened live. The second issue is I don't seem to have managed to get the LEDs to work. Nonetheless, it's controlling Traktor in user mode for me at the moment. And I've got it sort of 2 decks, one on each side. So whatever I do here, like this button will be mirrored over there and so on. So the way I've mapped user mode in Traktor is I have 2 decks, and whatever happens on this side is mirrored on this side. So this is the play button for the left, and that's the Q button, play button for the right, Q for the right. I can scroll up and down using these 2 pads, and then load on the left or load on the right on the controller here. So while it's playing, they currently sync to the master clock. So if I go into the master tab over here, you'll see I've got a master tempo, and then this controller does the tempo, and then this one is the crossfader. Then I've got bass sort of cut, that does in stages, and then a reset button. Then I have various different delay settings. So if we go back from the clock page, I've got different delay times. And then I can jog forward or backward in the track. And I can also do 1 bar or 32. So all of that is mirrored on this side, and then let's actually do the next section. There we go. So once I have a loop that I like that's not got too much going on, I might start adding elements from Ableton. Now to sync Ableton, let's actually put something in this drum clip first. So we've just got a clap as far as I can see. The kick is muted. So let's go back to Traktor. Now in the master tab, I am using MIDI send. MIDI sync send. The way I've done this, because there are 2 software programs, I don't have any wires for MIDI. I'm using virtual MIDI software, like a virtual MIDI driver. On the Mac, you have an IAC driver, which is built into the Mac. If you just Google IAC MIDI, if you go into your audio MIDI preferences, you'll see it there. It's usually disabled until you enable it, and then you can route MIDI, from one program to another using it. On Windows, I'm using a free driver called LoopBe, L-O-O-P-B-E, one word. So now I can turn on the light, and you'll hear it's fairly synced. It's a little bit worse. I had actually synced them up before I started screen recording, and it seems like the screen recording seems to throw things off a bit or add latency. I'm not too sure. I've got some internal audio routing going on as well. So anyway, now you can hear it. So I can add to it. I can also record things in. Let's go to a coffee type sound. So I can start playing on the other side. I can start taking the bass out. Going, and I've still got elements from the previous loop going on here. So, the other thing I should just show you is the settings for the synchronization. Here's my sort of push mapping. You'll see it's MIDI in 2 of push. If I click on that drop down, it's over here, MIDI in 2. That seems to be user mode from push. I think it might actually be labeled user mode on a Mac. Here is, where is LoopBe? Yes, here. So all I've done is in LoopBe, I've just assigned an out port for it. So Traktor's sending a MIDI out to LoopBe, which is selected here. So yeah, all I did was add generic MIDI and then give LoopBe as the out port. I should actually rename this to edit comment virtual MIDI sync. So now it will show up there. I'll know that that's virtual MIDI sync. And you'll see I have no mappings, but because it's sending MIDI sync, it'll send it through that virtual cable into live. The other thing you need to do is go into MIDI clock and tick send a MIDI clock. You'll see I've got no offset here. However, in Ableton, if you go to MIDI, you will see here this little drop down for LoopBe. Firstly, I set it to sync, and that's how it's receiving clock from LoopBe, i.e. from Traktor, and then I've got an offset here. I could tweak the offset to make it more in time, but it's particularly out of time now that OBS is running. And the offset was actually a lot lower as well when I had a lower buffer size. So you will just have to tweak that depending on your buffer size. You'll sort of hear it's late and you'll shift it back. So yeah, I hope you found that useful. If you have any questions, let me know. As you can hopefully tell, I'm trying to post new content every week. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Cheers.